Hey guys, this is ABC from Figure Fight Club. I got PJ Polacco, also known as Just Incredible, here with me. So Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you could take the time out to do an interview with me. I appreciate that very much. What have you been up to these days?
I just, trying to stay busy, man. I'm doing as many indies as I can. I work for Vince Russo's podcast network. Just finished a book and a documentary, believe it or not, that were both years in the making. With COVID, it kind of just helped us finish up, which will be released. The documentary, I think, is going to be released at the beginning of 2022, and the
Okay,
book will be out before Christmas. So a lot of stuff going on in that aspect, and still doing indie bookings as much as we can with all the restrictions,
hmm.
and just trying to stay out there, brother.
What's the book titled?
Excuse me.
What is the book titled?
We right now have a working title on the book. We have not decided yet, but probably something pretty simple.
Okay,
Something with my name, and we have a couple of different working titles, but it's not. It's one of those books where kind of like Sabu's book and other people, where it's a we print it ourselves
yeah,
with we have an author, and we pay to get it printed and then
okay.
sell it on our own. So that's really the last step, is deciding on the title. But
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
hopefully people like it. It'll it's just a kind of a an homage to my career, where I started, who did I
Mhm.
like, my influences, and kind of goes through the journey with me. Nothing groundbreaking, but still, it was really cool to put all those things together over 28 years, really,
Yeah.
of experiences in the business of pro wrestling. Which is really neat.
No, that's great. And I'm hoping to touch some of that tonight in our call. So, growing up, were you a big wrestling fan?
Um, yeah, I mean, I got into wrestling later in life. I started watching wrestling, I think, around 13, 14,
Mhm.
when Hulk Hogan won the title from the Iron Sheik. That's when I
Okay.
really, really started to become a fan. And but it wasn't until, because I live in Connecticut. I'm about 100 miles from New York City, and that's WWE territory, really. Always
Mhm.
was traditionally. So I was always, it's kind of the shows you got were Hogan, Ultimate Warrior. It wasn't until the NWA, through TBS, WTBS we started to get their shows up here, that I fell in love with the Nature Boy and Sting and all those guys, which really, forget about it. That transformed me and really made me think. Um, could this be possible? Could I do something in pro wrestling? Which later on I did.
Mhm. Mhm. So, you touched on some of the greats, like, Ric Flair, Sting, Hulk Hogan. So I'm assuming those are the people who kind of you looked up to before getting into the business.
Yeah, I mean, those were those. I mean, especially one other one, dude, that really inspired me. Remember Ricky the Dragon Steamboat?
Of course, who doesn't?
He was another one who. I mean, I love guys that could, and this was going back to the '80s,
Hmm.
guys that could, quote unquote, work before I knew what the word work was. I always was gravitated to people that could put on athletic matches,
Hmm.
not just. I wasn't a big fan of the big guys, just kind of hitting each other and stuff. I was a fan of more athletic matches. So, that's kind of, and then when HBK first came around after the Rockers broke up,
Hmm.
that was really what turned me on in pro wrestling, as far as like things I wanted to do.
Okay, so what was the motivation behind getting into wrestling?
I didn't know what else to do.
Okay, yeah, that's simple, plain.
Honestly, I mean, I got out of high school. I didn't want to go to college necessarily, because I really didn't know. When you're seven,
Mhm.
I got graduated at 17, and it's like I don't know what I want to do. And I didn't know what pro wrestling. I mean, I knew pro wrestling, what it was, but it looked like, to marks, and I was a mark because we didn't have the internet. And unless you read the dirt sheets, you really didn't know.
Hmm.
I thought you make it to become a pro wrestler. You're in the NFL, you're in the NBA, you're gonna make money, right? That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Um, so I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. I worked out, I had a good physique, and I think at 18 years old, I was working at a grocery store as a baggage clerk, and on my break, I went to to get a soda and a Snickers bar, and I went to the magazine stand, and there was a wrestling magazine that I always looked at, and there was an advertisement for a pro wrestling school, which was uncommon, back in those days. This was had to be 1991, and it was
Okay.
for Brett and Owen's family, the Hart brothers in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And it said, we're offering, if somebody wants to become a wrestler, here's a number. If you're serious, call, and limited space is available. I called, spoke to Bruce Hart, Brett's older brother, and saved up money for a year. And in summer of 1992, I went up to Calgary on my own and trained with the Hart brothers to become a pro wrestler.
Now, how was that? That was actually my next question. Is I know you went up to the Calgary, Alberta territory to train under Keith Hart, right?
Oh, it was really hard. It was I mean, it really pushed you athletically, physically,
Hmm.
mentally. I had no idea. I mean, even though I wasn't a mark, like I had subscribed to some newsletters early on, like, so I knew the nature of the business to some degree, but still to go up there and to fully understand, like, the physicality of it, and the price you had to pay
Hmm.
on all aspects it was insane. I mean, it really was. It's not for everybody. I remember 12 men and women started the camp, uh, and only two finished. I was one of
Oh,
the two.
wow.
Another gentleman by the name of Brett Farrell, who wrestles in Ontario, Canada, to this day as Jake Steele, Big Daddy Hammer. Never had much success worldwide, but wrestled, on the indie scene up there. We were the only two out of the 12 that started. So they really tried to, and I'm sure you've heard these stories, they tried to kind of make you quit, you know.
Yeah.
In those days, they would work you so hard that it's like, oh God, these guys kept coming back, you know. And it's like I banked everything on it. I was so naive. I was so young
Hmm.
and stupid. I just thought these people had my best interest in mind, so I just did what they told me. And in all reality, I got very lucky, to,
No, I
to come
mean,
out of that, with a some very good training, and b just to kind of right place, right time, because I'm native, born and raised, and still live in Connecticut,
mhm.
which is where the WWE headquarters are. I live probably 45 minutes from the office.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was also not by choice. It's just, where I was born.
Mhm.
It all kind of helped later on in life for me to get employed and to kind of help me on my way.
Okay, okay. And I'm assuming at the Hearts facility, that's where you met Lance Storm.
Yeah, Lance, and Chris Jericho, as a matter of fact, they went through the camp a year before I did.
Hmm.
So they were the prior camp that they came up through, both Lance and Chris. But the funny thing was, Chris had gotten, he had a little bit of success early on, so he was doing some traveling. And Lance he was from Ontario initially, but he'd moved to Calgary, and the Hearts kind of offered him the gig of, help us train the next class, because Lance was very good.
Hmm.
So in reality, Lance did a lot of the physical training for myself at the Hart Brothers School, even though it was, the Hart Brothers teachings, and they were there, but they weren't always in the ring with you. A
Yeah.
lot of that was Lance.
Okay.
So yeah, that was really where we got to meet up for he was the first like real pro wrestler I ever met. It was Lance Storm.
Oh, wow. Okay. And any chance that you were meeting, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Davey Boy, or Jim Neidhart?
None of
No.
those. No, not then. No, no.
Okay.
Keith Hart and Bruce Hart would come by, like I said, the training sessions, and they'd roll around with you once or twice a week. But Lance did a lot of the work. That's kind of how a lot of the schools are, really. You got the superstars' names up on the wall, but somebody else is doing the training, so to speak.
Gotcha, gotcha.
You
Okay.
know,
So after training, where did you find yourself in the Indies?
I'm sorry.
So after training, where did you find yourself in the Indies?
After training, I finished training in August of '92. I came home back to Connecticut, and I didn't know anybody. And I got a call from Calgary saying that they were starting a new indie federation up there, an indie organization called Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling, and they were going to run shows every Friday night in Calgary, at the old, or near the old Calgary Stampede, which is where the WWE still runs to this day. And it was a famous arena for the Hearts back in the day. So on my own dime, once again, I flew myself out there, and for the first 10 matches, 10 weeks every Friday, I got my start in wrestling, where I wrestled, my first opponent was the guy that I graduated camp with. My second match, or I know my third match, was Chris Jericho, who would come through, like I said before. So he was my third ever match. Got to work with Lance, I think match 6 or 7. And he mentions it too in his book, which is cool. So, I mean, early on, if you really think about the talent roaming around in those little, 50 people shows in Calgary, was quite amazing.
Yeah.
But I never got paid. I put up the ring, took it down.
Mhm.
So I think the last show I did for them was December 10th, if I'm not mistaken. And then I just ran out of money. I was starving. I was broke, and I didn't want to scare my mom and dad and telling them, look, I'm failing. There's no money in this. I'm coming home. I just tried to make it look better than it was. So I came back home in December for Christmas of '92. And then I'd say February or March of '93, I went to a house show for the WWE in New Haven, Connecticut. And I walked backstage just to kind of try to, because they always told you, go to as many shows as you can, let them know who you are, kind of, make connections. And I went back there kind of with a lot of balls. I brought my bag and was like, I walked backstage, and I saw the agent and famous wrestler Tony Garea, who ended up being a big mentor for me in the WWE. And I was like, Mr. Garea, sir, I brand new in this business. I was trained by the Hearts. And as a matter of fact, Brett and Owen were both on that show. Although I had never met them, as I said previously, still I had connections to the family, and they were very hospitable. He's like, well, we don't need anybody today, because you always are told, go to a show. Sometimes people don't show up. If you have your gear, they'll put you on, right, as a replacement.
Okay.
Of course, that didn't happen. But long story short, Tony was very kind, let me watch the show. And as I was leaving, which was amazing, I saw, a lot of amazing superstars. I still was awestruck. And at the end of the night, Tony Garea said, well, we're starting a new show Monday nights in Manhattan. We're going to tape every week, called Monday Night Raw. We're going to need some extras, quote unquote jobbers, to come in and get beat up. He goes, if you're interested, here's my card. And that's how I got my into the WWE/F. Was that chance that I took to go down there, introduce myself, and to start, getting squashed in Monday Night Raw. And I think my first one was March, April, maybe April, against Lex Luger, which was on television, where he just destroyed me in a couple of minutes, whatever. But again, it brought me into a new world of now. Vince McMahon is there watching me, commentating me. He's getting to see you, right? It was a different world than it is today. So yeah, it was just a great experience, and they kept calling me back to do more and more, because mind you, this was the day of this was the era of Vince was doing that steroid trial that he was accused of, and they were really getting nervous financially. So, and business was down. So they were cutting back. Their TV tapings were all close to the office, because I've been to the headquarters and to the studio many times. It's all in a 45-minute radius from my house, but they have all their gimmicks there. All their TV trucks are parked there. So they started doing TV tapings closer to Stamford for money reasons. So they don't have to spend so much money to produce them. So I was getting called up almost weekly to do jobs to produce the television shows, because instead of flying somebody in from the Carolinas, I could drive an hour and a half. There I am, at the Garden, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
you're
really,
nearby, and
again,
why
what
not?
really helped me. And also working hard and showing that, hey, this kid's not too bad.
Mhm.
All of it together helped me get a break, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So how did Aldo Montoya, the character, come about?
Um, okay, long story short, and I'll try to fast forward it while it all makes sense and connecting the dots.
Hmm.
As again, and this is I would say summer of '94, August 1st. There was I don't know if you remember this, but there was a big SummerSlam match. The main event of SummerSlam, August 1994, was Undertaker versus Undertaker.
Yep.
You
Yeah, I
remember that?
remember that. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, they needed Brian Lee, who was Undertaker's best friend at the time, was going to play the fake Undertaker.
Hmm.
So, that's a big thing. They want to make sure it looks good. There was no performance center, mind you. In these days, it's all in Stamford where they keep their trucks, their lighting, the cameras, their stage. All of this is in a warehouse in Stamford, exit
Okay.
9 off of I-95, if you're familiar with the Northeast. But so Tony Gurria, again, a champion of mine, always liked my work, liked me as a person. He said, PJ, Pat and Vince need somebody to go down and basically work with Mark and this kid they got, Brian Lee, for this thing. I was going to be a bump machine, basically. I was going to go in
Hmm.
there and be a body to work this kid out to get him ready to debut the character. And I would be the guy working with them on the live Monday Night Raw following. So that whole week prior, Mark, myself, and Brian Lee, just in sweats and shit, we'd go down, 9 to 5 or 9 to 3. We'd spend the day working out, messing around, just in sweats, and grab a cup of coffee. They would talk, and when it was time to do some stuff, they would work out. And, Mark was there to make sure he did everything exactly like Undertaker, you
Okay.
know. So that happens for Monday through Thursday. Friday is the big dress rehearsal. So Brian Lee gets dressed up head to toe in the Undertaker gear. They do the makeup, everything. So Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson come down from the office to the studio to see this firsthand. So it was just Mark, Vince, Pat Patterson, myself, and Brian Lee. That was it, 5 guys in a room.
Hmm.
And we go through it. He does the entrance, from the side of the, just like totally like, like an audition. Everything happens. It went through fine, whatever. It wasn't rocket science, They were looking at him, not me.
Yeah.
Okay, that everything's done. Pat, Vince, and Taker, or no, Vince, Taker, and Brian Lee are off to the side, kind of discussing business. And Pat's in the ring, and he's like, "Hey, kid, you're pretty freaking good." He goes, "Where were you trained?" And I'm trained by the Hart brothers in Calgary. He goes, "Oh, Brett's, yeah, Stu's kids, yes, sir, yes, sir." He goes, "Oh, you're pretty good." I was 19. I had a good physique. I
Hmm.
could work already. I was blessed. I mean, I had a little bit of ability then early on. And so he asks me this one question, just kept kind of talking, but he was asking me questions. And one question he goes, "Hey, kid, what nationality are you?" And I said, "Oh, Pat, I'm Portuguese." He goes, "Ha, ha, hey, Vince, this guy, he's Portuguese." And I was like, "That's weird, right? It's a little
A
weird."
little
But
bit.
Vince kind of chuckled, went back to the conversation with Mark and Brian. Okay, Pat and I keep talking a little bit. He goes, "Hey, kid." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Do you speak it?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do. My parents are I'm a first generation. My parents are immigrants, came here in 1970. I was born here, but I spoke Portuguese before I spoke English," which is true. Very
Hmm.
true. So I fluently speak Portuguese. And then Pat again turns around to Vince. "Hey, Vince, this kid fucking speak Portuguese." And he pops even bigger. Long story short, Vince had wanted a Portuguese character the whole time because, again, with the steroid trial and other things, Davy Boy had proven very big in England with SummerSlam '92 with
Hmm.
Brett, and other places. They had the Canadian people, and they wanted more European. So they figured they could use me in Brazil, in Europe, with Portugal, as a character that spoke the language to kind of help bring in fans of other countries, and especially Portuguese denomination. So they were looking for someone that was Portuguese and spoke it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then the Aldo character was created from that.
Okay.
And at first, Aldo was a soccer player.
So how did
A
it
lot of
turn to
people
the
don't
Man
know
of
that.
War?
So Aldo was originally a soccer player. So
Wow. So how did it turn into the Man of War?
they just changed their minds. I had nothing to do with it. I'm just a kid. If they wanted me to dress up as a woman, I would have.
That's true.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I just wanted to work. I was going to get a WWF contract. I didn't care. But then they changed it. So, but I originally got a drawing for me as number 25. I looked like almost like a Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, with the hair and the number 25 and the soccer ball and the whole, soccer uniform. But then they decided to go with the drawing for Aldo looked more like a Power Ranger. Really, from back in the day, because in the 90s Power Rangers were big, and really that's what Aldo looked like on paper. I know that when I put on the gimmick was very poorly made, the mask especially, so it didn't look like it did on paper. The cartoon character they drew looked like a comic book hero. It looked badass, but it did not reflect in person with the costume that they made for me.
Gotcha,
But and either way, it gave me a contract. I was making 6 figures a year, traveling the world, right? For 3 years, I traveled the world as Aldo, and also learning from the best. I worked with Mr. Perfect. I worked with Shawn Michaels. I worked with, not Hunter. Well, I did work with Hunter, but before he was so good, Taker. I mean, you name it. I worked with all of that generation, all of the top guys, which that's a learning. I mean, that's
huge.
That's like going to university. Like with the Hearts, I graduated high school, and when I went to the WWF, that's like graduating Yale or something. Like a great university, and gaining all that experience right before I went to ECW.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, having that dynamic of someone new, younger too, being in this big stage. So how did that feel, like going out there for the first time and in front of a bigger crowd in general?
I mean, it was all very surreal. And at first, what I must say is a lot of people don't understand, especially the younger generation today, the millennials. In those days, man, it was still, even though it was, kayfabe had died a bit, it was still more of a, like, you had to be careful in the ring, because a lot of those motherfuckers would shoot on you. They weren't afraid to like lay it in to make themselves look good. It was still that era of tough guys coming out of the late 80s, early 90s. So, I mean, there were times where if you didn't do good in the ring or whatever, guys would stiff you and really kind of send a message to you. Or if they didn't want to put you over, they would be hard to work with. It was that generation still a little bit, which doesn't happen today, but back then it still did. So a lot of times I felt like, you're in there a lot of times fighting for your life, especially when the guys there like Yoko, and Yoko was a sweetheart, but they were so big, and I'm like 220. I'm 6 foot 220, and they're 6'3", 6'4", 270, 300, if not more. It was like I get my ass kicked so much, man. I got the fuck beat out of me, dude. I'll tell you.
I mean, it was all for a good experience, though.
Oh, it was an amazing experience. Like I said, I got to travel the world, dude. I mean, I went all through Europe, South America, Canada. I mean, the only places I haven't gone to that I regret is probably Australia, and maybe some places in South America, but Mexico, just Puerto Rico, just so many places that were just so wonderful. Amsterdam, Sweden, Switzerland, all throughout Germany, Spain, England, Italy. You're traveling the world, so forget about it. So it was just amazing.
No, that's great. So during that time in WWF at the time, is that when you got involved with the Click? Because I know you had some relationship with Scott Hall and Sean Waltman.
Yeah. I mean, it was when you get there, it's, a lot of guys have come from different territories, or,
Mhm.
everybody kind of comes from somewhere and knows someone. I didn't. I'm still very fresh and green and young in the business. So these are the first relationships I'm making, right? As a wrestler. So I remember the first tour I ever got booked on, and I wasn't even Aldo yet. I had signed the contract. I was going to be Aldo, but they had it still hadn't come up with the costume yet. So they put me on the road as PJ Walker, just to get a little experience. That was my jobber name. Just opening match in the small towns, and I was 20 years old. I couldn't rent a car, and in WWE, and even to this day, they do this. You get your plane tickets, right? But when you get to the airport, right, you get dropped off at your home airport. Where do you fly from, for example?
Well, RDU, so in North Carolina.
Okay, so you would go there and you'd fly to, let's say, New York City.
Mhm.
Once you get to New York City, you're on your own. You have to figure out
Mhm.
how you're getting to the building. And then once you get to the building, how you're going to the next town and the next town. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be able to rent cars, book hotel rooms. That's all on you. I had never experienced this, right? And at that in those days, at that age, I think you had to be 24 in those days to rent a car. You had to have a credit card and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, I couldn't do any of this because I was so young. And I'm not the only one that came into this problem. I think X-Pac, Sean Waltman had the same problem. But anyways, I get to the airport. I had no, I'm like, what do I do? So I went to Tony Gurria. I'm like, Mr. Gurria, sir. He goes, I can't rent a car. I need to get to the building. He goes, just come with me, kid. So I went with Tony Gurria, Chief Jay Strongbow, and Rene Goulet, who was another agent at the time. Loved Rene.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know him, but he was amazing.
Okay.
And I get there, and Razor's like, in the locker room, we're just kind of getting ready, and he's like, "So who you traveling with, Puss?" And I'm like, "I'm with Tony and I think Chief Jay Strongbow, like I said, Chief and Rene Goulet." And he goes, "Bro," he goes, "you're just starting in this territory." He goes, "You're gonna get so much heat traveling with the office. They're gonna think you're a fucking stooge." He goes, "From now on, you're with me." And it was that, because if I get the point he was trying to make. If the boys see you traveling with the office,
Mhm.
they're gonna think you're a fucking stooge, right? You're like
Yeah,
one of the
always.
office stooges. So from there, Razor just kind of took me under his wing, and that was it. That was the unholy alliance for the rest of my early years in the WWE.
Gotcha,
Because I
gotcha.
had to, but by hook or by crook, I had to travel with that fucking insane asylum, and sometimes
I'm sure
it
you
was
have
good,
plenty of travel
sometimes it was
stories.
bad.
Yeah.
Huh?
Tell me one of the travel stories of with the click.
I mean, we would generally always be doing something stupid. A real quick one, and I hate to like glorify this, but I'll say it quick. Um, okay, first day of the tour, we flew into Montreal,
Mhm.
Quebec, Canada, and the first night of the tour, we had a show in Quebec City, which is about 3 hours away from Montreal. We all fly in, we all meet, and I was with Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Hunter, and Scott Hall. And Shawn is the world champion at the time, and he's like, and we're Montreal is notorious, and everybody will back me up on this. Montreal was notorious for not having any good food at the airport, and really not a lot of good food on the way to Quebec City. And when you're flying all that time, you really do get hungry. So there is a famous strip club that serves the best steak and rice in that place, so near the airport. So those guys come up with the idea of let's go to the strip club to get some steaks, and then we'll be on the way to the next town for the evening show. Okay, well, we get there, we start eating, order drinks. Time starts rolling by. It's about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and people are starting to get drunk.
Mhm.
We're at a strip club, and we got to
Yeah.
drive 3 hours for the show. Kevin is always driving. Kevin always drove. We had a big van. Kevin does not drink and drive. A lot of the boys, we never did drinking and driving, and they wouldn't let me behind the wheel anyways. But I had a buzz, the other guys had a buzz, and it's like five, almost 5 o'clock, and I know the show starts around 8, and we still have 3 hours, and I'm still in Montreal, and the show starts at 8, and I got 3 hours to go, and I'm gonna be like showing up at showtime, and I'm the opening
Mhm.
match.
Did you make
So,
it?
well, it was also snowing that evening.
Oh.
So I'm sitting there, in the car. You got to understand, you have Shawn Michaels, who's one of the biggest stars in the business, getting
Mhm.
ready to be world champion. You got Kevin Nash, Big Daddy Cool, Razor, Hunter, you know, and then you got me. We didn't have cell phones in those days. Think about it. This is 95,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, one of them said to me, just get dressed. We're like, it's like 7:45, like get dressed. We're almost there, and it's snowing. We're like, and then Quebec, Montreal, all that shit. It's like real shady, nothing like the US. So I'm literally getting dressed in the van. We literally roll in like doing 100 miles an hour to the back of the building. I'm in the Aldo mask. My music is playing, and I see Blackjack Lanza and Chief Jerry Strongbow. Get the fuck in the ring, go! They lift the big garage door up. I'm running, trying to tie my boots on the way to the ring. I'm wrestling Savio Vega, but he was doing the Quang gimmick. You remember Quang with
I
the
think so.
mask?
Yeah. 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 I remember that. Yeah.
Like the Japanese, he was doing the Japanese wrestler gimmick. So okay, I get to the ring barely dressed. Quang, who was a veteran,
Mhm.
and highly regarded, is now getting his entrance. I was late, I'm still drunk, mind you. I'm buzzing hard. And then, the music, they do their announcements, the music stops, and I'm looking at the curtain. I'm kind of looking around, trying to get my bearings. And I look around and I start to see the curtain where we walk out of moving around and people peeking out of the curtain. I see
Mhm.
Undertaker, I see Bradshaw, I see a lot of heads peeking out of the curtain. I'm like, oh shit, Savio's gonna do something. They're like all pissed off that this young kid shows up late with the big boys. Okay, motherfucker. So, anyways, he decided to, or they knew something was going to go down. Therefore, they were showing up and selling out the curtain to
Mhm.
see what Savio was going to do to me, right? And boy, he chopped me probably 30, 40 times as hard as he could in that match. But I gave it back, and the crowd was hot. It
Mhm.
actually ended up being one of the better matches I've had in the WWE as Aldo. It was a really good match. The crowd went nuts. And I earned a lot of respect from the guys that day because I didn't bitch about it. And Savio was like, be careful, motherfucker. Don't do that shit. He goes, you're lucky. You did good. He goes, but they were looking. They were kind of, everybody was looking to see what you were made of. You want to play with the big boys, gotta show up. And I showed up, and but that was kind of what it was. I was a kid. I was
Mhm.
caught in such a whirlwind. A lot of times it wasn't my design. I mean, I was 21.
Yeah.
If you think about yourself when you're 21, you don't even
Yeah.
know
I'm still a
anything,
kid. Yeah.
much less the politics of the pro wrestling game.
Yeah.
But that was just a great experience, though, and it was one of the funny ones.
No, that's great. So after that, I'm assuming you kind of jumped ship to ECW.
Yeah, I spent some time as Aldo, and then I realized nothing was coming out of the character. So I respectfully went to Vince and asked for my release. Long story short, nothing very eventful. I went to ECW to work for Paul Heyman, and
Mhm.
that's when it really, started to take place. Really,
Oh, wow. So how was that? Like, how was Paul Heyman actually as a
he was
person back
great.
then?
I mean, he was literally amazing. Working for Paul, I mean, he gave you. See, I had a bit of an advantage because they had a lot of great talent there in
Mhm.
ECW. They had Sabu, they had Taz, they had Van Dam. Shane Douglas had been to the WWE before and to WCW, but they didn't have a lot of experienced guys on that had been, I'd done 2 Royal Rumbles, I'd done how many Monday Night Raws. TV show. I knew how to work television, and ECW was starting to evolve into more of a pay-per-view / television company. So Paul was like, look, I got this. He saw me as I got this young kid that I could really groom, and he has experience, so I can make him one of my guys. So that's what Paul did. He saw that, he goes, why do I have to train a guy like Balls Mahoney or whatever? Just an example, when I have a ex WWE guy that's been to the dance that can, that has a decent body, takes care of himself, has good shape, that could do the same thing. So I just worked my ass off. I saw the opportunity. I saw the thousands and thousands of hardcore fans every week coming to the shows. I knew that this was something special, and anybody could tell if you were at these events, these live events, how special it was. And Paul came up with the idea, but then the beautiful part was he'd give it to you to kind of like, look, this is what I want from you, but up to how you get there is up to you. So it was like a collaboration. It's like writing a beautiful song with somebody or whatever. You get the, this is what I want, but you guys figure out how to get there. So it was like a lot of times it was me collaborating with Paul or Tommy Dreamer or Shane Douglas, or Sabu. Just a lot of cool. I learned a lot about the business, and I made a lot of money, dude. I made more money at the end than I did in WWE as Aldo.
Okay.
I was making 150 grand a year as a ECW champion, where as Aldo I was making 120.
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still decent money, but I couldn't believe that as a ECW guy was making more money than a WWE guy. But then again, I was being a top guy for ECW, not a bottom guy like I was in WWE.
Yeah. So who came up with that famous catchphrase while you're at ECW?
Paul Heyman. That was Paul Heyman. That was all Paul. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. You guys want to give a demo to the guys about that?
Yeah. That's not just the coolest, and that's not just the best. That, my friend, is just incredible.
It still gives me goosebumps, actually. So
something so simple, but it worked.
It did work. I mean, it was actually a really good catchphrase. It worked really well too.
And that was the age of catchphrases.
It was.
It seemed like every popular act, like the X, NWO, it's almost like catchphrases were the thing. So it was just, just following suit. That was a very late 90s thing to do.
Yeah. So tell me about the Impact players when you teamed up with Lance Storm.
Again, it was another one of Paul's ideas. Paul was a great idea man. He left the details to the boys, but he would come up with the big idea, and he came up with the Impact players because Lance and I, the history that we had that I explained to everyone earlier in the podcast, and it was just, okay, you guys have history. And also what made it special was I had jean shorts, t-shirt, and stole the Singapore cane from the Sandman. The other guy is Lance Storm, a technical wrestler, a bit boring and plain. Can I be serious for a minute? I would get mean and nasty and shout into the camera and say, suck it, and all this. And Lance was very different. But the two together, like what I didn't have, he had, and what he lacked, I had. So it's like, maybe I was a little more charismatic or a little more off the page with attitude, and he was a bit more reserved. I was the brawler, even though I was trained by Lance and could do those things. My style ended up having to almost become a brawler, and where you know what I mean. Lance was more of the technical guy. It was almost like a Neidhart, Jim Neidhart, Bret Hart, where they're different, but they complement each other very well.
Yeah.
And we were different. Our attitudes were different and everything, but still the pose was my idea, where Lance, I said, Lance, let's do the Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels thing. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, I just got the Singapore cane from Sandman. He goes, I'll stand behind you with the cane and do the Big Daddy Cool. And you do, because your arms are huge, you do the Shawn. with the pose, and that became the Impact Player pose, just a rip off of Sean and Kev.
It worked.
So we did a lot of stuff like that, of like trying to complement one another. You know what I'm saying? And it made it fun. It was entertaining for both us and the fans, I think.
Now, how did you feel like emotionally when you won your ECW world title?
It was very special, and oh shit, I keep doing that to the camera. I'm sorry. It was very special because we don't necessarily acknowledge that pro wrestling is real, because it's not. Obviously, it's a worked thing. It's no different than acting in a movie or being in a show, whatever. But it's true, but it's not true. There's also a lot of heritage, and it means a lot. And what Paulie gave me that night by putting the world's heavyweight title on me meant, PJ, we trust you to headline all of our pay-per-views, kind of be the flag bearer for the company. And this company in 1999/2000, when I was the main player, was the third biggest wrestling company in the world. We were on pay-per-view 6 times a year. Had a national television show on Spike TV and TNN. And I'm the representative, even though, we went out of business and so forth. We didn't go out of business because of lack of fan attendance or lack of anything. It was, and Heyman admits it to this day, it was, I think, the early days of ECW, where Paul had to spend so much money when he finally started to make money. Because if you look back, the last ECW pay-per-view, the last 2 were both at the Manhattan Center, sold out 3,500 to 4,000 people with huge ticket prices. But the damage had already been done. So many years of bad business and, bad loans and so forth, just put the company in the red to the point where Paul could not get out of it. Because ECW, and again, when he was on, and I'll even give you where he said it. It was the Steve Austin podcast. The first time he went on, and he said when ECW went out of business, that year was actually the most profitable year it had. We had just garnered so much bad business from the 94, 95, 96 years before we really started to because it takes a while for those rewards to reap in. Pay-per-view, I don't know, a lot of fans know this, but pay-per-view revenue, when you do a pay-per-view, it takes up to 6 months to collect all the gate receipts. In those days, I know it did, because you're dealing with cable companies. So let's say you do 100,000 buys, right? That's realistic, probably what we were doing. 100,000 buys. It took a good 3 months to collect on that, because you got to go to Comcast. They have to write you a check. Then you got to go to On Demand. They got to write you a check. And you know what I mean? It's like you're looking for that money. It's not like all of a sudden you get, okay, the next day after the pay-per-view, you get a lump sum, right? And he had to pay the production companies. Like for him to hold a pay-per-view, he had to put out $250K to, you think about it, for the lights, to rent the building. He was always robbing Peter to pay Paul. And a lot of times he didn't have those monies coming in fast enough, and that's really what it became. He was doing a lot of times. I know Heyman had mafia style loan shark deals where he would borrow 100K and have to pay back 150K to put on a pay-per-view, and we were making it, but with these bad deals to advance money. He was always, it was just a matter of time, dude. Even if we could have stayed on for a month or 2 or 3 later, unless we hit a big TV deal, we were so far in the hole from, again, past business. Because think about it. When was the last time a wrestling company came from a small indie that had 200 fans to a national pay-per-view thing, and something like ECW, which is still talked about? It's unheard of. And he had something special. Unfortunately, when you don't have money, you got to do what you got to do. And that's why the mob always won, right? A lot of interest, a lot of extra money, and they're going to bleed you dry till you go out of business. And that's what happened then.
ECW was definitely one of the most entertaining shows I would like to watch on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Yeah, it was special because it was very honest as far as the presentation, as far as fun, having fun,
Hmm.
watching something. You know, every time you watch an ECW show, you're gonna laugh. You're gonna watch some really good wrestling, maybe some contra. You know what I mean? You're gonna see a holy shit moment somewhere.
Yeah.
And this was going on in the days even prior to the Attitude Era and prior to all of those eras. And that's why the ECW succeeded. Let me say this really quickly. I don't want to get stuck on it,
Hmm.
but the reason ECW succeeded was WWF had Doink the Clown, had Aldo Montoya,
Hmm.
had a lot of bad gimmicks. WCW had the Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, Hulk Hogan wrestling the Shark, and Brutus Beefcake as the Booty Man, and they horrible gimmicks. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying was ECW was the fuck you. We want good shit. We want
Hmm.
guys like Terry Funk, guys like Sabu. We want real old school wrestling. And then, of course, deathmatch wrestling started to become a thing in Japan, and there was a
Hmm.
big cult audience with that. So Paul Lee said, let's bring a little bit of that style over here. And fans that wanted more, that were getting, Doink and Adam Bomb and so forth, got, the Sandman and Sabu and Terry Funk and Rob Van Dam and myself and Tommy Dreamer, and
Hmm.
the list goes on and
I
on.
mean, you guys were
So
just different. You're
it was
different from
it
everyone
was
else.
kind of like we were a throwback to old school wrestling, and wrestling fans really wanted it. It was a thirst
Hmm.
because nobody else was doing it. It's like
Yeah.
we didn't do it first. Everything we did, somebody else did it. It was just
Hmm.
a long time ago, and nobody brought it up. But we just brought the hardcore stuff back to the masses, when I think wrestling needed it the most. That's why it was successful,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
because Dusty was doing that shit back in the day. You know what I mean? We just
He
kind
was,
of
yeah.
made it a thing, capitalized on it, but we didn't invent it by any means.
Hmm. I mean, I think it was the right time, the right moment to kind of start
Right
it.
place,
Yeah,
right time, which is
exactly.
like everything in wrestling, which I think AEW
Hmm.
is right place, right time. And I can't wait for tomorrow night to see
I
what
know.
goes down. It's going to change. I'll tell you one thing. Listen to me, and it'll be on the podcast, your podcast first. It's going to be a game changer. This tomorrow night, I predict, and I hope I'm right. It will be equivalent to when Hall and Nash showed up in WCW. It will
Mhm.
be the equivalent because it will game change. There's the internet. Like, you got to understand, we didn't have the internet. I mean, we had ECWWrestling.com in the late 90s, but it was
Yeah.
like, download a picture that's going to take 10 minutes or more, right?
Yep.
It wasn't, we were just getting news and information and updates, maybe some ticket sales. It wasn't like streaming video and social media.
And
So
far
with
from it. Yeah.
today, forget about it, dude. This is going to be the new Hall and Nash NWO invasion with CM Punk, because, excuse me, a lot of people didn't think Punk was ever going to come back to pro wrestling.
Yeah. That's very true.
So to me, this is going to be huge,
I agree. I
huge,
mean,
and
you
it's
got
good for the
Punk, you got
business.
Daniel Bryan. That's going to
And
be amazing. Yeah.
yeah, another one right there.
Hmm.
And they're going to the Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. Look, man, like I said, buckle down, dude. Business. Jr. said it. Business is about to pick up, and it's going to be awesome. I'm excited. This is the
Yeah.
first time, and I've been in the game, dude. 28 years. Jericho's got 30. He celebrated his 30 very famously. You
Hmm.
know my history. I just told the story. I'm 2 years behind Jericho. Year and a half, 2 years. 30 years is a long time, and we've been waiting for this. This
Yeah.
is a long time coming, and it's going to be a game changer. And it's just exciting. It's exciting for me as a fan and as a
Hmm.
performer. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That was actually one of my other questions. If you watch the current product of like AEW and your thoughts about it, but now I know.
I'm sorry.
But and I was saying that was one of my questions. If you watch the current product of like
Oh yeah.
AEW, and
Oh yeah.
how are your thoughts about AEW? Now, how do you think WWE is doing right now?
I don't watch WWE. I do, but with AEW, Vince Russo, who, the infamous Vince Russo hired
Mhm.
me 2 years ago when AEW Dynamite started, and we do a review show for his Patreon. So I've watched every single AEW show, Dynamite show, and reviewed it. And I'm a big fan, man. I'm a big fan. I'm deep into AEW.
Mhm.
And I don't love it all the time. But I think they got the right idea, and it's just, to me, a positive, just something different. I don't want
Yeah.
to say game changer. It's just something so different than what we're getting on Raw, than what we're getting on SmackDown.
Mhm.
And now that it's such a unique time where we have potentially CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, and just CM Punk alone. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, I never thought CM Punk would wrestle again.
Yeah.
Period. Period. And just the fact that he's going to be working for somebody else, and all the releases, possibly Bray Wyatt.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, I even reviewed the show last night, Dynamite. Today is Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
last
it.
night I did, right, because I do this all day long, so sometimes time gets lost. Um, they did a promo. Did you watch last night?
I did not yet, actually.
Okay,
Unfortunately, I
they have
was
this
not. Yeah.
guy. I don't know if you've been watching it. They have this guy who's been running promos with a bunch of MMA, UFC guys. Have you seen that?
Running promo? No.
Okay. Anyways, they got this famous guy who's like somebody who is in the ring with UFC guys, and he's cutting promos on Cody and AAW.
Okay.
And
Okay.
somebody mentioned the fact that this could be the start of a Brock Lesnar
Hmm.
faction, because it's strictly kind of an outlaw angle that they're doing, and it's basically talking about UFC. And these guys are very famous, very popular, very big names in UFC. So it's like so much stuff is happening and could happen. I'm telling you, this is going to be,
This
the
is.
start of something like WCW and the Monday Night Wars. This is 20 years later, could be, and it would be great for the business because
Mhm.
everybody would win. AEW would make money.
Yeah.
WWE would make money. The boys and the girls would make money. We all make you make money on your podcast. I make more. We all make more.
Mhm.
Let's,
Exactly.
that's one thing, like, that I want to tell people is, when the business is hot, we should always try to make the business hot. Let's not talk shit about it. Let's try to
Mhm.
celebrate it, because guess what? More people will listen to your podcast. More people will book me on their podcast or book me on their shows or
Mhm.
whatever. It's like we got to keep the cycle going. And I think that this thing is going to be special because we have not seen anything of this magnitude, storyline wise, at least. I'm just talking storyline
Yeah.
wise.
Yeah.
But CM Punk, if I had said last year, 2 years ago, CM Punk's going to show up for a foreign company and blow what would you say? Get the fuck out of here.
Exactly. Yes.
And
Again,
it's
I
going
don't
to
think
happen.
so.
And they're this is their second show on TNT. They
Mhm.
already have Dynamite. This is their second show. So they're already on the fucking, this is
Yeah.
like yesterday I found very funny. Well, not funny, but I found kind of cool a fact. He goes, this is the Tony Schiavone. This is the first time that Sting has wrestled on TNT in 21 years. And think about that. That's pretty cool. Like,
That is really
at the
cool.
same
Yeah.
time, it's like, so the fact that they're on TNT, there's a chance. Anytime you got another wrestling company on a network like that, pushing strong and doing good ratings, TNT is
Mhm.
very happy with AEW.
Yeah.
Great for the boys, great for the business. That's what we got to think. Not even think like most people are worried about, let's take sides, WWE or AEW. Anybody that knows anything is going to say, let's take both. Let's make them
Yeah.
both rock. They matter more when they're both going, because we've seen it. When Vince has no competition, he's just going to give you the most boring shit in the world.
Yeah.
So
No.
Vince
Competition
needs
gives you a lot
competition.
of things. Yeah. I agree
And when Vince,
completely.
if Vince, right, and if you saw what happened, Vince got beat by NXT,
Hmm.
or AEW beat NXT.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
moved, and you don't think Vince wants to, like, okay, it's just good, healthy competition. Everybody wants to be number one, and that's how
Yeah.
you bring out the best in people. Is just healthy competition, and it with who wins in that is the fans. because the fans are going to get a better effort, a better show, better entertainment, more surprises. They're going to bring in some shit that you've never thought. And that's what we miss, is those oh shit moments. I can't believe I saw that. I'm gonna tune in next week. That's what we loved about the Attitude Era, the Monday Night War era. And I think we're gonna get that again. I really truly do.
I hope so, because I remember as a kid kind of growing up and seeing that it was all about the channel flipping.
Yep.
So
And we
what's
didn't
going on
even
over here?
realize how great it was until it ended.
I know, we missed it sorely too.
It was right in front of our eyes, and we were just like, we assumed, oh, this is going to happen forever. So hopefully, look, I want everybody to do good. I want all my brothers and sisters in the business. I want you as a podcaster. I want all of us to make money and do well, because the more we do well, the more we can continue to do what we love. And that's the bottom line, just to do what we love and what we're passionate about. It should be fun. This business, one thing that those guys taught me, and the late, great Kurt Hennig always said to me was, PJ, I love doing this shit because it's fun. And that's the reason we do this, and we get blessed to make good money doing it. And that's something to kind of see. It's like, we should be fortunate to get up and be able to talk to one another miles away about something we love, and put it out there to the fans. Pretty cool,
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. Yeah. So I think we're running out of time.
Okay.
So thank you very much again
thank you for having me, man. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm almost debating if I should call you in for a round 2 one day. There's a lot of stuff I didn't touch on yet.
More than happy to, brother. Hit me up after the podcast, and we'll talk. I'd be glad to come on, because I have so much more. Bro, I could talk to you for a while. We could do this all day. I was just getting started, but yeah, definitely, man. Hit me up and we'll go forward. I would be honored to talk to you again. You have a great podcast. And for the fans out there listening, don't forget, I'm going to retweet and share everything about this podcast. I want to make this particular podcast blow up for this gentleman and for all of us, because we got something cool to say. So, and I think it's entertaining. So for all of you guys out there listening, please share, retweet, whatever it is you do, and get the word out there, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Abi from Figure Fight Club. Thank you very much.